Welcome again to educator.com for academic writing. Remember, in the last lesson, we went over some very broad kind of organization strategies. For the next few lessons, what we're going to be going over is very specific organization strategies. And we're going to start with listing and classification. Okay, now the purpose of listing and classification is to divide your topic into several different categories, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute. And it's also to describe or define those categories themselves. Well, what's the difference between a fish and a marine mammal? Well, those are two different categories, and we need to define what those categories are, as opposed to saying, sharks and whales. That's not telling me what those categories mean. Also, it's very simple to just describe several objects in a set. What's great about listing and classification is if you don't know how to organize your points in either your paragraph or in your entire essay, you could always just go back to listing and classification. It's the easiest to understand and it's the easiest to write. When you're going into your details, it's usually one item or classification per paragraph. And then these minor details are usually describing that classification or giving specific examples of that type of classification. For instance, if I said computer electronics, I might say iPod as an example of computer electronics. Or if I was to say mobile device and said iPod, that's an example of a mobile device. Those are really simple, easy to understand. So, we're going to start off playing the good old-fashioned Sesame Street game of one of these things is not like the other, one of these things just doesn't belong. And we have several items here. And we need to figure out what items belong in kind of a set together, in a larger category. Now here's the tricky part. Baseball, golf, basketball, and football, they're all sports, right? Yes, they're all sports. Don't they all belong in the same category? Well, yes. They all involve, some kind of ball, right? Well, yes. But what do baseball, football, and basketball have that golf doesn't? Well, baseball, football, and basketball all involve teams. So golf doesn't belong in this list anymore. So what I would do is I would call this larger category my team sports, and I would put basketball, football, baseball, football, and basketball in it, and golf right over here, that kind of belongs in its own little land, and we're not worrying about that right now. Notice, I have three major supporting details now. I could write an essay if I wanted to. Another way to do listing and classification is start with this broader category and then divide it out into three separate ones, like this. Domesticated dogs. Well, what kind of domesticated dogs are there? These are dogs that you keep as pets, not dogs that you run from when they're stray on the street. Well, we have one class, which we call the gun dogs. These are dogs that were bred for hunting. We have toy dogs. These are toy dogs that, are like little poodles that, and chihuahuas and, kind of like the stuff you see people have in their apartment. They're, taking them for a walk down Hollywood Boulevard. Those are toy dogs. And then we have herd dogs. We don't have those in Los Angeles, but I bet if you live out in the country or you maybe have a large acreage or a farm, you know what a herd dog is. Well, these are dogs that are used to herd sheep or cattle or some kind of other livestock that somebody might have. 1, 2, 3. Can I write an essay about these? Yeah, I think I got an essay going right now. Now I know what you're thinking right at this moment. Aren't there more than 3 kinds of team sports? And aren't there more than 3 types of dogs? Absolutely. That is absolutely true. So how do you get it down to 3 major points for a 5-paragraph essay? Remember, introduction, body paragraph 1, 2, and 3, conclusion. Okay, so I need to get this down to exactly 3, right? If I want to write a 5-paragraph essay and stay within those rules. How do I get down more than 3 sports or more than 3 types of dogs into 3 paragraphs? Well, turns out that I can think of 3 things that you can do to do that. The first thing you can do is just choose. And I really do mean that. Choose whatever you like the best, flip a coin, roll dice, do whatever you like, and you can just choose. Here are my team sports: hockey, football, water polo, basketball, baseball. And I'm going to just arbitrarily cross out 2 of these because I want my essay to be 3 paragraphs. With apologies to everybody in the United States, I'm not a big fan of football. And with apologies to all of you in Canada, I've never been to a hockey game either. So my essay is going to be about water polo, baseball, and basketball. And those will be my 3 team sports that I'm going to use. Now, there's another thing that you can do in order to divide these up. And that's when you try to find similarities and then combine them by the similarities. All of you who have been reading Brave New World, you know what the alphas, the betas, the gammas, the deltas, and the epsilons are. That's 5. Do I really want to write a 7-paragraph essay? You know, if you want to write a 7-paragraph essay, go right ahead. But I'll just give you a warning. It might be a little boring, and maybe your teacher doesn't want to read 7 paragraphs. So what we should do is we should combine a couple of these by their similarities. And I'm going to show you right now. Notice this. I'm going to put the alphas and the betas in the same group because they're the smartest, and they're the leaders, and the ones in charge. Then I'll put the gammas and the deltas in the same group because they're average intelligence, and they kind of do servant work. And then finally, I'm going to put the epsilons. If you guys remember in Brave New World, this book right here, epsilons are at the very bottom. They aren't very smart. In fact, they kind of don't even look like they're totally human. And they were called semi-moron, and they do very demeaning menial tasks that, well, I don't even want to describe it, but you get the idea. 1, 2, 3. Now I have 3 paragraphs. Now, there is one more thing you have to do when you're trying to look at several categories and divide and put it into 3 paragraphs. Break the rules. Here we have the familiar Harry Potter houses. We'll start off with the greatest, most noble house, the Slytherins. Then we have the Gryffindors, Ravenclaws, and those Hufflepuffs that, well, didn't really do anything, but they're there. Now, if I was going to try to combine these into 3, which 2 would I put together? Well, I can't really put any 2 together because if any of you have seen the movies or if any of you read the books, you know that each one of these groups is really, really distinct. They're all pretty divided up. Additionally, can I really just remove one? Can I just decide I want to talk about Slytherins, Gryffindors, and Ravenclaws and just completely ignore Hufflepuffs? Well, I mean, that is kind of what J.K. Rowling did when she wrote the books, but still, there's 4 here. So what am I going to do? As a last resort, I'm just going to break the rules. I'm going to have 4 paragraphs, one dedicated to Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw in my essay, and I am going to talk about all 4, and I'm going to give them exactly 1 paragraph each. How many paragraphs is my 5-paragraph essay going to be now? Now it's 6. That's okay. You can break the rules when you have to, but try to obey the rules first. So, in order to do kind of a sample classification essay, they do have their own kind of keywords and other types of things that you must follow. So I'm going to go over a couple essays here, and I'm going to highlight the keywords for you. There are several different types of marine mammals. Several, that's an important keyword. First, there are whales. Whales are the largest creatures on the planet. The blue whale, for instance, makes dinosaurs look like puppies. Their songs and their flukes attracts tourists all around their world. Another fun marine mammal is the dolphin. They are recognized by their nose that catches fish and beats the sharks. Lastly, there are otters. Otters live near the ocean shore. You recognize them by their thick fur and love of kelp forests. All right, so I've highlighted some things here, and I'm giving you clues to a particular pattern of organization. Here's another one. All countries have political parties, including the United States. The common parties here are the Democrats, Republicans, and third parties. There's my thesis. I don't have any keywords here yet, but we're going to see some in a minute. One party, the Democrat Party, is supported by several groups. For instance, teachers' unions, employees' unions, and environmentalists often support the Democratic Party. A second party is the Republican Party. Republicans often say they want less government than the Democrats. For example, they do not like high taxes or national government programs. The last parties are the so-called third parties. These parties are very small and do not have a lot of power. However, people who do not feel comfortable with Republicans or Democrats join the third parties. Examples of third parties are the Libertarians and the Green Party. What words was I highlighting? Are you noticing kind of a pattern here? Can you see in those two examples where I have the major supporting details and the minor supporting details? Here are all the keywords that you might want to use when you're listing or classification in your own writing. For major supporting details, pretty much any number is going to be your keyword. 1, 2, 3, first, second, third, last. In my thesis, I might say something like several, or many, or there are 4, or there are 3. Those are examples that, hey, we're going to get a listing. If those words sound boring and they don't flow too well, you might use another, other, in addition, also. Those are other words that work really well with listings. So I can say, one example is this, another type in this category is this, and finally, the third type in the category is this. When you're talking about minor supporting details, you will use words like for instance, for example, and specifically. And again, you can always say one example or a second example or third example. Now, there is one more thing that we're going to be going over when we're listing and classification. There's kind of a subset of this entire organization, and that's kind of our definition words. Here they are. Recognize, known as, defined as, is, are, called, named, referred to, known for. You recognize a dolphin by its bottle nose, which it uses to catch fish. One example of a marine mammal is called a blue whale. The party which is supported by the teachers' unions and employee unions is referred to as a Democrat Party. These are definition keywords. You want to watch out for these when you're reading and make sure you use them in your own writing. If you're talking about something your reader has never heard about, please use these definition keywords. Here's an example. The leaders of society in the Brave New World are known as the alphas and the betas. The alphas are recognized by their tall size. Size means leadership in the lower castes. Additionally, they are known for their superior intellect. The other leaders are called betas. They are not quite as smart as the alphas, but they are still leaders. The main difference between alphas and betas are the amount of people they govern. Why did I call this a major detail in a larger essay? Well, imagine if I was writing an essay to you, or you're writing an essay to somebody, and they haven't read Brave New World. I think it's a good idea to dedicate one entire paragraph to just giving a few definitions for the readers of my essay. I don't want my reader frustrated. I want my reader happy, because I want that reader to give me a good grade. So, to kind of wrap up here, you want to get your points down to 3 if you can. And you're going to do that by combining similar items. And if you can't do that, you can break the rules. Or you can just choose 3. Break the rules, remember, is your last resort. And make sure that you use listing and definition keywords at the appropriate times for major details and minor details. Remember, there's a lot of listing that can be for major or minor details, but things like to illustrate, for instance, for example, specifically, you'll use those almost always for minor details only. And finally, make sure that the items you discuss have at least a few things in common. So, if they don't have a few things in common, they don't belong in the same category. I can't say gun dogs, herd dogs, and cats. That doesn't make any sense. I can't say dolphins, whales, and sharks. Well, they all live in the ocean, but 2 are marine mammals and 1 is a very vicious fish. They don't belong together. So make sure that whenever you're discussing things, they all kind of belong in the same category. You know they're the same category when they have a few things in common. For your reading, Wrinkle in Time, continue with chapters 10 through 11. It's getting to the good part. You're about halfway done now. For Brave New World, read chapter 17. We're nearly done with that one too. There's no written response for you guys, but please, please, please do pay attention to kind of the novel check-ins that are also being recorded for educator.com. And you are going to read a few sample essays. Find the key terms. What are the major details? What do they have in common? And how are the items listed different? Go ahead and go to our sample essays that we have posted at the website for this lesson and read those sample essays. Thanks again for using educator.com.